avoidance show up most in believers when they over spiritualize. It's the same thing, and it shows differently through avoidance, though. And I want to take us through a trip and refer back to the last video from this, because we dove into age detachment. But here in avoidance, as we mentioned previous, any attachment style is developed in your childhood between the ages of 2 to 3 to 8 to 9. This is when the childhood wound is, or attachment style rather, is developed. Okay. And in the process of this thing being developed, specifically for the avoidant, there's a few things that they see that's different from the anxious. As we discussed, the anxious is taught in some way, shape, or form that love isn't here to stay, right? And so because love isn't here to stay, in order to keep it, you feel you have to perform. And that has a lot of different roots for it. For the avoidant, what they are seeing is that there is a guaranteed level of disappointment that's on the horizon with any relationship of proximity and closeness. This is how vulnerability is seen as a weakness. This is how hyper independence is built among individuals, is because as you were growing up as a child, there were things that you needed that, depending on your parents and caregivers, how they did and didn't show up, you weren't able to get that, you were neglected. And after a while, you begin to believe in some way, shape, or form that I got me and only me. And it convinced you of maybe what we might put in our music today. Me, myself, and I is all I got in the end, right? It's a hyper independence. It's a shutting down that takes place, right? Out of fear of the cost of closeness. If I let you in, there's a fear that if I let you in, this isn't going to go well. If I tell you the truth, this is not going to go well. You're not going to see me the same. You're not going to love me the same. I'm not going to be in the same vicinity of acceptance as maybe I am in this moment while I'm remaining nonchalant, while I'm remaining distant, right? So it's best for me to simply disconnect, disengage, and detach, because that's a form of survival and safety for me. Because as an avoidant, just speaking as someone who is an avoidant or someone who is experiencing the avoidance, when you are avoidant, that's the belief. I'm safe. I'm safe with this distance, because if I don't let you close and if I don't let you in too far, then you don't have the privilege of disappointing me. You don't have the privilege of hurting me. And this all came from moments where you perhaps initially gave others the chance and they disappointed you. So you were like, it's not happening again. And I'll be sure it's not happening again. And there's so many walls that show up. And so this is where it begins to show up through your adulthood, where it's hard to get close. Proximity is challenging. And anytime that a conflict arises, we run. Anytime there's a need for truth to be present, we don't appreciate it. It's hard for us to be honest. It's hard for us to communicate. It's hard for us to actually express what we are, where we are, what we feel. But it's not because you're always processing like you assume and like you tell others. It's actually because you're just afraid of the outcome. You're living in fear, and your distance is actually controlling it. Because typically in any connection that has an anxious and an avoidant, because that's a classic relationship connection and dynamic, the anxious chases, the avoidant runs. And so when the anxious chases because they're uncomfortable with space, the avoidant runs because they are uncomfortable with proximity and closeness. So we get this repetitive loop and repetitive cycle where both people are running and chasing, tugging and pulling every which way. And for the avoidant, I think this is really important to show that there are a few signs that lets you know that this person is perhaps operating in some avoidant traits. And there's different variations of each, right? Of disorganized attachment styles and things of that sort. But I really want you to consider this just for our conversation in this moment. The avoidant shuts down emotionally. Processing is their favorite term and favorite word to use, but it doesn't take you processing that long. It's just that you're trying to come up with a way to not engage with this in the way that it does. Perhaps you deflect. No accountability whatsoever. You would prefer to create distance and run away. Anytime there's a need to bring up counseling, coaching, therapy, you claim you don't have time. You claim you're not interested. You claim it's not that serious and not that deep. You minimize the emotional expressions and pains. All in efforts of what? Not experiencing the disappointment. You're protecting the little you from being disappointed again. And this is where the challenge of love comes into play, because love invites us to take risks. And it's weird that at the same time of understanding that the avoidant wants to protect the little them in them that has been disappointed enough, is still yearning and longing for an experience of love. I'm gonna come back to that in a second. But I want you to just consider that the thought process of the avoidant in the efforts of shutting down, in the efforts of lashing out and experiencing anger, in the efforts of distance, in the efforts of being detached and disconnected, nonchalant, appearing as chill, but really hasn't processed their pain. It's all coming back to experiences that had happened from early childhood, relationship to your parents and caregivers, that began to show up in friendships, dating relationships, romantic relationships, and every other relationship in between as you continue to grow older, that is starting to show in your adulthood, that is giving you permission to run and create distance because it's easier, it's safer to not address the conflict, address my emotions, address what I feel. And I've made it this far, so what's hurting me now? And I'm gonna show you what's hurting you now, because it's often playing a role in your relationship with Christ as a believer. It plays a role in the healthiness of the stability of the relationships that you can create. Because as I opened up, anxious over spiritualizes, so does the avoidant. But the avoidant spiritualizes in the way where they say, I'm gonna leave it all up to God, as if there's nothing for you to do. As if there's no partnering with God in experiencing the transformation that you say you're leaving up to God to do. As if we haven't seen this in Scripture. As if we haven't seen this idea that you have to participate in experiencing the miracles you're praying for, instead of just thinking God is supposed to swoop down and do it all. God separated the Red Sea for Israel. But guess who still had to put one foot in front of another to walk on dry land that God provided? It was Israel. Guess what? God said, I'm going to take you to this promised land. But guess what Israel still had to do? They still had to work. They still had to go into that land and take it over, fight who was in there. And we saw the first time when they didn't do that, and they what? Delayed their expectation. They delayed their arrival. Right? When you think of Israel and their promise of this land flowing with milk and honey, they're thinking of cows. They're thinking of bees and beehives. You know what they're thinking of? That even though God has produced this, we still have to work to maintain it. Now, we can go all day. How about we just come back to 1 Corinthians 13? Because 1 Corinthians 13 is inviting us to a level of maturity and love that we're called to. But there's a specific line in here that really addresses what the fearful, or not a fearful avoidant, sure, but the avoidant in and of themselves are struggling with. 1 Corinthians 13, of course, we talk about verse 11, right? When I was a child, I thought as a child, I acted as a child, I spoke as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. And so we understand from the previous video that Paul acknowledges that there was something he had to bring about and heal through from a childlike perspective in order to actually mature into the love that he's been called up to, and he's inviting Corinth to step into, as it reflects them walking in the gifts they've been given. Cool. I want you to go back to 1 Corinthians 4, verse 8, that section. There is a specific verse in there. As we read, love is patient, love is kind, it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil. Here it is, but rejoices with the truth. Oh yeah. See, this is the part that many avoidants struggle with, because in their minds, telling the truth is wrong. Because if I tell the truth, then not only am I not going to be received, but this is no longer going to be in existence. And what we have to do is address the inner child wounds to reprogram and reshape cognitive reframing, those beliefs that have created some sort of emotional wounds that have stored in the body that are keeping us from walking in the space of truth, where we see telling the truth as a form of love, because it is, according to Scripture. For God is love. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And truth is meant to set you free, not keep you in bondage. And so what we have to do is address the inner child wounds in order to walk more into this mature love that sees truth as a benefit, not something that is going to cause a great level of disappointment that you cannot recover from. And there's so much more to this, but maybe in another time. I hope this made sense. If it did, type call it in the comment section below. and follow for more. Speak to you navigating relationships.